Well, hello there. Welcome to another edition of Paranormal Plus. We got Dennis Carroll with us tonight. Hello, Catherine.
Good evening.
Hello,
Good evening,
Norma.
sir.
Hello, Stuart. Hello, everybody. Crazy Witch, Gary. How's everybody doing tonight? The Nana Boss. So, yes. So I got me a new little gadget. I got me a new EMF detector. Guy Eric makes them. It's a little skull one.
That's easy to spot too, by the way, isn't it?
Yeah,
just look for the skull.
It actually it lights up. Of course, with my background, you can't see it. But I'm gonna have it on during the show, so just in case if anything happens.
Yeah, well, I was watching your show earlier about haunted objects, and I've had a lot of history with haunted objects and some of the stuff you've got going on in your studio from time to time. I hope you got your holy water handy in case we run into any of my low-lit spirits tonight. There you go.
Yes, I do. Right. I've got it.
Yeah, just in case. It's always good to be safe, on the safe side.
Yeah, it is.
I've been involved in spirit research, Chris, for a long, long time. I'm not going to say how many years because I hope I don't look that old. But I've been involved in a long time, and I was just thinking tonight, since we're going to be talking about this subject, I was thinking about the very, very, very first experience I had with the other side, you might say, the unseen. And when I was a kid, I think I was about 10 years old, we lived in a haunted house. Actually, this house was a big old 2-story house. And the old man that had lived in this house, his name was Broadwell. He was a miser, kind of like Scrooge. He was kind of a miser, and when he died, they cut holes in a lot of the walls in his house looking for his money. Any money he might have left behind. But there was some really freaky stuff that went on there. I'll tell you 2 quick ones right quick. At night, a lot of times, you could hear the door. There was a door to the stairwell that went upstairs. And my mother, who was always afraid of fire, she didn't want me to sleep upstairs. She wanted me to sleep downstairs. But at night, you could hear this door open sometimes, very late at night. And it was like somebody going up the steps. So one night I got up, I said, is that my mother, my father, or somebody going up the steps, Because I heard it more than once on one occasion, And I went and I got up and I went in and I opened the door. I had a flashlight, shined it up. There's nobody. My mother and father were asleep in bed. There was nobody else in the house but me and him. And that went on a lot of times. You could actually hear these footsteps going up, and they were very dragging, like they weren't quick. They were very slow. It's like an elderly person would walk. So that was interesting. And I'll tell you one more quick one. One day I was sitting there watching TV. It was an old TV set, one of the old analog TV sets. And it was in the wintertime, so none of the doors were open, none of the doors in the house. We didn't used to have air conditioning back in the old days. We had window fans, and you left the screen doors open, you left it open, the screen doors.
Right, yeah.
But this was in the wintertime, and I was sitting there watching TV, and honest to gosh, I'm sitting there, and I hear the door latch click on this door, and the door was shut between me and the living room, okay? And it just went click like somebody turned the knob. I was sitting there looking at it. The knob turned. I thought my mother was coming in or somebody, And the door just slowly swung open. There wasn't nobody there. And I'm sitting there staring, and I said, well, that's freaky. And the first thing I thought about was the wind, but there were no doors or windows open, and the house wasn't drafty. I remember. Because when I'm sitting there looking, honest to gosh, that door slowly closed by itself and the lock clicked back on.
Yeah, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. No.
That was a wild experience. I'm sitting there like, what could have done that? But one more I'll tell you right quick. When I was about I think I was about 12 years old. This was a few years after that. See, some of the kids and I in the neighborhood, there was an old house in the neighborhood that everybody said was haunted. This was a few neighborhoods over from where I originally lived in that house. And everybody said this whole house was haunted. We wanted to go in this house because it was boarded up and everything, when there's nobody lived in it. And we finally, here's we know kids being kids, we broke in the back door of this house. And we got in this, and it's just like out of a horror movie. All the furniture's covered with sheets, there's cobwebs everywhere. It was a spooky looking house. So I think there were maybe about 4 of the kids with me. I went on in the living room, and they went down the hall to some of the other rooms in this house, because there must have been 10 rooms in this house, okay? And that was just the bottom part, not the upstairs. So I go to the stairs, and I see a baseball laying on the floor there, And I said, some kid threw it through the window, and they were too scared to come in and try to get it. So I was gonna get the baseball, but I said, well, I'm gonna go upstairs a moment. I'm gonna run upstairs and check, see what's up there. I'm always been curious, maybe too curious sometimes. So I said, I'm gonna do that. I put my hand on the banister, and honest to gosh, Chris, as I started putting my foot on that first step, right in my ear, not whispering, I mean loud, I could feel the vibration of this right in my ear. Get out, just like that. And I jumped back. I said, well, I thought for a minute it was one of those kids playing, a trick on me or something. But I look, and they're all still down the hall. I'm in this room alone. Well, I didn't take, that for being a sign I was very welcome. So I said, I'm getting the heck out of here. So I left them, and I told the other kids, I'm leaving by, and I left. And, that was a very freaking experience. And that was something that really it didn't dawn on me till later what really, truly took place. Sometimes it takes you a while to understand these things what you've been through. It can be sort of kind of a shock. Later on, I'm going, God, that was an unseen entity in that house, and it didn't want me in there. But I mean, I could actually feel the vibration, just like the wind of someone speaking. The force of it was loud, and it was very startling. And to me, that was my first real true experience, I think, with actual unseen communication, you might say. Because it communicated very well with me.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. So you saw the show where FDL was asking questions and the REM pod was responding. I was like, I'm like, what are you doing?
Shocks you.
Questions. It shocked me.
I tell people say, are you just scared? No, there's a difference between being scared and being startled. It's a shock, a start. To be startled is different than being actually scared, because you get scared, you have a reaction, a fight or flight thing, but the startle is like you're just kind of in shock, and that happened to me when I saw those demonic spirits. And I'll tell you something else, and I was just thinking about it the other day. I worked for 30 years at a local hospital. I want to tell you something. That is one of the most haunted places you can ever go in, is a hospital. And I've had a lot of experiences at that hospital. Yeah. And not just houses. It can be a lot of different areas. It's not just a house. I've been in a lot of supposedly haunted graveyards all night long. I have investigated many parts of Charleston, South Carolina, which is one of the most haunted cities in the world. I spent one night at all alone by myself, and you talk about one spooky looking place, all alone by myself on a place called Rope Maker's Alley in the heart of the city, where supposedly you can see the shadow of a murdered pirate on the wall. I was hoping he would show up all night, but I don't think he ever did. But if he did, I didn't know it. But you can get into some very interesting places. So it's not just houses; it can be a lot of different areas. But here's the thing about it, Chris. It's a lot. A lot of these areas are haunted, and we've talked about this demonically wise, but we can talk about this human spirit wise too. A lot of places are haunted by the trauma, like battlefields and stuff like that, where people die. And what could be more traumatic than death, you know? And
Right.
I've had some cases where I think people who traumatically died were sort of caught in a vortex between life and death because they didn't really, I don't think they really knew where they were going, or if they were caught somehow or another. It's a very strange concept that the spirit could actually be caught in between places. But I've had to do what I've called several soul rescues, where you actually address these entities and let them know it's time for them to go on over, and not stay there anymore. I've had some very interesting cases like that. And of course, there's my other favorite is residual hauntings. That's a fascinating subject in unto itself because what you're dealing with, I call them, are the ghost of memories.
Right.
They're ghosts of memories of that place. And I'll tell you a quick scientific thing. I want you to think about this. This is wild. It has been proven scientifically that water, now this is a little water here, water can retain a memory. Okay, now I know that sounds freaky, but it's true. Water conducts energy. We know that. Okay, water
Right.
conducts energy, and that's part of the process of us retaining a memory. Okay, think about, Chris, how much around you right now where you're sitting has water in it or has an amount of moisture to it. Think about that. The very walls around you contain that. Not just in the floors, the carpets, the ceilings. You're surrounded by water or liquid that way, that kind of a liquid. Think about that a moment and then take that and put it somewhere where something very bad or traumatic happens. Murder. I've investigated a lot of murder suicide areas, okay? Um, I know there was a double murder area I investigated not long ago. You're talking about a very eerie place, very eerie. Anyway, this was like a murder that was during a robbery. So there were heightened tensions, there were heightened emotions taking place during this. It was traumatic. And so it definitely leaves that memory. I think it imprints that memory. That's sort of what we call, we think about as residual haunting. But a lot of times, I think residual haunting is tied also to the concept of time and space. We may be seeing, for just a moment, we may be able to see back into the past. Like watching a movie film. We may be seeing that, and they may not can see us, but we can see them. And sometimes I have to wonder how many times it goes the other way. They can see us, but we can't see them.
Right.
And are
Right.
we ghosts to them? That's an interesting concept. Are we ghosts in their time period if they see us? So that's an interesting thing too. That's really, really to me far out, but I like the thought of images like this that never go away. They're always there if you can only access them some way or another. I believe that's true. I believe that it never goes or dies away. That it's there, existing in some ethereal field or whatever it may be around us. If we can only just pluck it out and watch it or listen to it, who knows what we might see or hear.
It is. It's a very fascinating subject. We always have questions about it. The last show, it's weird because sometimes we have activity, sometimes we don't. And it's strange. Why does it happen? And how can it happen from one country to another?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, not
how
happen sometimes. You
Right.
know, I think it's a matter, and I've said this to people before, Chris. I've had a lot of people say, "Why can't you find this? Why can't you?" I said, "Well, if I could make the paranormal perform when I wanted to, I would be a very rich man." Okay, I could really do some stuff, but it's not that way. I think you just have to be at the right place at the right time sometimes, and the atmosphere has to be right. A lot of factors have to kind of click into place for some things to happen because I know a lot of people that on nights of the full moon they say there's more prevalence of hauntings, or when there's like a thunderstorm or a dark stormy night, there's more energy in the air. Your chances are heightened by that, okay, of actually running into something in that respect. But I think you just got to be in the right place a lot of times at the right time, and you got to be open to this, okay? Here's another thing, Chris, we have to look at. If you're making a connection with the spirit world, you got to be open on your end, okay? You got to be open. This is a two-way thing here. And if you go into something very doubtful or disbelieving or shutting yourself down and not opening up to what may be there or what you may encounter, you've already defeated yourself at the beginning, I think, to a certain degree. If you see or experience something, you're going to be incredibly lucky under those circumstances. So I think a lot of times, if we're more open to it, our minds are open to it, spiritually we're open to it, then I think you may actually have that experience you're looking for, that connection, that communication. I've noticed that a lot of times in a lot of different cases I've had where your attitude plays a big, big role in it.
Yeah, that is true. Thank you, Catherine. I greatly appreciate that. Yes, thank you. But it just makes me wonder because, it doesn't act on command, right? So, and because if that was the case, everybody that's on the fishing show would catch all the fish, in 20 minutes, like they always do when we watch them, right?
Right.
So it makes you wonder, but it's interesting how you can ask questions and it
I've
actually
had
responds.
I've had instances, Chris, where you go all night and nothing happens, and there, right at the very end, bam. You know, they're not on our time. We got to remember that. It's like when you're doing EVPs or you're checking stuff out with an EMF. Please remember these people, whatever plane they're existing, they're not on our time, and we're not on theirs, really. I mean, we got to understand that. And I've told a lot of people, I've mentored a lot of groups over the years. I say, when you do an EVP, give it 4 or 5 minutes to answer back, okay? Before you ask the next question. Give it because it's not on our time. Who knows what kind of a time sequence thing is going on here? So a lot of times they go through there, blah, 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 bounce one question after another. You don't even give them time to answer you if they are going to answer.
Right. Right.
But
No,
it's not like Ghost Hunters on TV. You don't go in, oh yeah, okay, run into something. It takes hours, maybe sometimes more than one trip there to get that thing. It's the way it
yeah.
goes.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize it takes, 2 or 3 days worth of filming to get, that 40 minutes to make that show. So,
Somebody asked me one time what was the one place I would investigate. I said I would dearly love to investigate Dracula's castle, but I'm not going to do it in a couple of nights. I want you to drop me there and leave me for at least a couple of weeks because that's just the way that goes. You got to go. You got to become part of the environment for one thing. That is a major thing, and I talk about that in my book, Beyond the Shadows: A Field Guide to the Paranormal. You've got to become part of that environment for them to accept you because once you go in there, you're something new. You're a threat, like, to them to a certain extent. You're messing things up when you should really start trying to assimilate yourself into those surroundings and making you. It's just like very much like deer hunting. Okay, the most successful deer hunters are sitting up in a box or a blind up in a tree, and the deer can't see them. They're part of the environment. That's the best way to handle that. Although you have to You have to try to communicate, but I'm saying give it time to settle down. But everything has to settle down and get back to this normalcy before you start actively investigating something like that, you know?
That makes sense. I mean, that's actually true. I mean, you can't just go tracing out in the woods. You got to wait and let everything, calm back down and be still and quiet. Yeah. Especially being an ex deer hunter myself. So, yeah, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but
But
they don't show you that on TV, though. You said those hours upon hours that you got to sit there in a dark room all alone by yourself waiting for something to take place because that's not Hollywood, okay? That's boring. And it is boring. I have gone to sleep several times just sitting there, waiting for something to happen. I kind of doze off a little bit. It is boring, but you got to try to stay as much attentive as possible because little things can go on, isn't it? Sometimes, Chris, it's not something big like a chair moving across the floor. It can be little things. It can be like maybe a little statue on something moves or something vibrates. You've got to be very attentive to what you're doing, you know, because you got to remember this: they're not playing by your rules. Okay, they don't. They got a different whole ball game going. They're not going by your rules. Think you should be this and they should be doing that. You can't tell them what to do because they're gonna do what they want to do. That's just the way that goes. So you've got to be very attentive. You got, as we say, used to say in law enforcement, observe everything, and that's
right.
what you got to do. Yeah.
Right. So what is your favorite tools to go on investigated when you go hunting, ghost hunting? What do you like to take with you when you used to go?
I had two very favorite tools of mine: EMF meters, which I like. I had a very good. The trifield is my favorite, by the way. The trifield. It is a scientific instrument, by the way. It's used by scientists all over the world, not just for ghost hunting. Um, the trifield meter is my favorite uh, because it covers different areas and different types of signals and electricity and EMF force fields and stuff like that. And my other second favorite tool, you might say it's the tool, is my dog. I used to take a dog with me. He was very hypersensitive to EMF. He was a really valuable asset because I'll tell you one thing about dogs and cats. I've never heard of a cat being taken on the investigation, but that might be interesting. But the dog is not going to lie to you. He's not going to tell you a lie or give you his opinion. He's only going to tell you what he's experiencing and what instinct is working on him with that experience. So you can really take that to the bank if that dog reacts in a certain way. And I believe me, I've had some very interesting dog things go on in the investigation. You know something is definitely there. And that dog, 9 times out of 10, could sense something that EMF detector never could. So that's an interesting aspect of it. It was a living instrument, you might say, an instrument tool. Dogs are used for a lot of things, and being in law enforcement, we knew that for drug sniffing and bomb sniffing and weapons sniffing and all this other stuff. Dogs can be an invaluable tool in this type of research as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would they just give you signs where they look in a direction, or would they just puff up their ears and be like, huh?
That you got to watch them close because of the different little signs they give you, like a bird dog. Now, my dog is a bird dog, by the way. He's a cocker spaniel. He's laying over here on the floor right now. He's retired now, by the way. Anyway, he bird dogs are very. I like the more sensitive hunting dogs for this because their senses and their instinct are highly tuned to that respect. Um, you got to watch their mannerisms. Their mannerisms will tell you a lot. They can tell you if they're like looking a little nervous or if they're sensing something. You got to watch the movement of their head, the tail, the eyes, what they're looking at, and all that. That can tell you a lot. That there's something there with you that you may not be able to feel. But let me tell you a quick story talking about something being there. I was investigating this house one time, and I was actually in the garage. It had a built-on garage, an enclosed garage, and I was in the garage because some activity had taken place there. And it was on a hot summer night, Chris, and this garage was closed. It had no windows. It had only a big roll up door, and the door was shut. The door between the house and the garage was shut. So I'm sitting in this, it had to be 90 degrees in this garage, and I'm sitting there with another guy, and I'm sitting there with a temperature probe in my hand, a temp gun, as we used to call them. And I'm sitting there with it, and all of a sudden I could feel something approach me. And I'll tell you why I could feel it. It was not like a wind, but it was sort of like a movement that you can see, feel, but not see. If you can understand what I'm saying, you can
Yes.
feel it, but you don't see it. And I turned the meter on and started gauging that, and it was 90 degrees in there. And all of a sudden, it starts going like 88 degrees, goes to 85 degrees, and it's like it's coming closer towards me. And then it gets down. Finally, it got down to like 82 degrees before it started going away. Now that's a dramatic temperature drop. And it was a cold spot. It was sort of like a moving cold spot. Well, I got up and immediately started looking for drafts. That's where these temp guns come in really handy for. And of course, they could use them for air conditioning and refrigeration, comparing all that. But this is another interesting way to use them. I started going on the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The floor was concrete. The ceiling and walls had absolutely no drafts. It was 90 degrees everywhere I put that thing. So
Wow.
what approached me sitting there was definitely, it was something, you know, definitely.
Yeah, I use one of those too. I got my handy right behind my curtain. Because that night that I was holding one of my dolls, I was trying to tell people in the audience and watching how cold the feet were. They're like ice cubes. And I
Ah,
was like, and of course I didn't have my temp gun where I could actually shoot the feet and show everybody how cold it was. So they have to rely on my testimony, which people that don't know, he's like, yeah, right, whatever, right, and
right.
it's just something else to show people, right? Is evidence. It's another tool in your kit. So, but and when that dog got yanked, it was like, what? Because Michael at the FDL was like, what was that? What just happened? In his UK accent. And when I was holding the dog at the bottom of its feet, it like somebody took the arms and was like, give it here. And when it did that, I yanked back as it yanked forward, and the dog came out. And that was me, ladies and gentlemen. I got too close to the EMF detector. So that's false alarm. But it yanked down my hand. So I did a real good cleansing about 3 weeks ago in the studio, like I told you on one of the shows prior, and the activity subsided quite a bit, but it's starting to ramp back up. But it's not bad. Only thing it's doing now, on the last show, it turned off my over. If you look at my glasses, you can tell I got a light on. Right, you see the glare. Yeah, I got a
Ah,
light on. So it would turn the light off during the show. And I'm like, I just turned my light off. And I'm like, whoa. And they were like, did you just turn Grizzly's light off? And the EMF, the one that Eric made, the skull, it beat. It would go beep, 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 beep. And it would respond to their questions and answer. And it was just like, it's just crazy how you
that's
can
freaky.
actually, interact with things. But my question is what are you interacting with? Is the
Yeah,
question.
that is the premier question, Chris. And I've talked to a lot of investigators about this, researchers and all. Once you take that demonic card off the table, what are you really dealing with? If you can make sure it's not demonic in that respect, and you got to be very careful with that because they're so downright tricky. They know how to pull the wool over your eyes if you're not careful. Then you got to ascertain what it is you're dealing with. Is it human? Is it elemental? or what the case may be, or is it? And here's a lot of things a lot of people discount. Could he be an animal type spirit? I believe animals have spirits, definitely. Um, could it be that? You got to ascertain what it is you're dealing with and what's playing with you, trying to communicate to you, or how it's doing that. That's very important. That is, I call it the main major part of your investigation. First, find out what you're dealing with. You know, that's what you got to do.
So when you used to go in on your investigations, I mean, did you ever do your EVPs and stuff like that? And I
Oh,
mean,
I've been cussed out on EVP several times. Very bad words. Those were usually EVPs and also radios. The tuning radios, the boxes,
right,
voice boxes, yeah, and all that. I've had to do that as well. They can be kind of rough. And most of the time when that happens, you're usually dealing with demonic spirits. They love to curse you out. But sometimes you can run into what I would say would, and I think it's kind of rare that this happens. And I'm gonna lay something kind of weird on you now. Sometimes you can run into what I call imprisoned spirits. These are like either held behind by demonic forces, or either held in check or held behind by something left undone, by something that they dreadfully need to do, or something that was undone or not done, or whatever the case may be. It's an emotional prison for them, so to speak, uh, in that respect. You got to understand, like I said, it's very important. You understand where they're coming from, what you're dealing with. And of course, another big aspect of all this investigation, Chris, is your history of that place and the people that may have been there. That's very important because that's going to tell you a lot more than even an EVP a lot of times. But EVPs are important to that respect, but you got to be very careful. They can be contaminated very easily. And you're never going to find the perfect spot or the perfect situation for the perfect EVP. It just don't happen because there's going to be some outside noise. It's going to pick up you breathing. I've even had instruments that can almost pick up your heartbeat. You know, you've got to understand there's ambient sound no matter what you do, and you got to try to screen as much of that out as possible when it comes to EVPs. But my favorite are the Class A EVPs. You can undeniably understand them. Definitely. I had one time. It concerned my dog. We were going in a haunted barn. And I had a young lady with me, and my dog would not go in that barn, by the way. I had to leave him outside. He would not go in that barn. He'd follow me anywhere, but he would not go in that barn. So I went in there, and we're doing, well, looking around, and the girl with me, she's doing the EVP. And she's asking questions. I think one of the questions is, how did you die? Or something like that. And it kept repeating over and over again. It did it about 3 or 4 times. Whale, whale. So I got to thinking, what the heck? You don't have a whale? So I go back and I asked the woman that owned that barn. I said, you know if anybody died in that barn or what? Trying to get more information out of her. She said, no, not as far as I know. I said, well, do you have an old well here on your property? And she said, yeah, there's one in the barn.
wow.
I would love to have excavated that well, because who knows what you might would have found.
Wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you never know what an EVP is going to tell you, and you might have to unravel the clues to it sometimes. But they're very important for that respect. Have you heard of what we used to call grave whispering?
No.
Yeah, well, you can actually supposedly put a tape recorder down on a grave, talk to who is ever in that grave, and see if they will whisper something back to you. That's a very old trial that's
What?
been going on for a long, long time. But some people have said they have successfully picked up this whispering, And why it's whispering, I don't know. It's not very loud, but it's very distinct. But I have to wonder if it's sort of sometimes, Chris, sort of like in a pareidolia with a sound and not sight. Are you really hearing somebody trying to communicate with you, or what? But grave whispering is very freaky stuff. I've heard some interesting things out of it.
Stingray, I can picture Stingray going to a cemetery and
And you got
trying.
to actually lay down on the grave with the recorder and hold it down and ask it the
Oh
question.
no, 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 no.
That's what they do.
No, no, no. My
I've seen it
luck,
done. I've never done it myself, but I've seen
my
it done.
luck. I would do that, and I would hear some banging. The earth would move. I would hear somebody mumble. No, that is too spooky. I agree with you, Stingray.
Well,
Crazy
there is a
wit,
part.
no.
There is a part, Chris, of necromancy. I know you know what necromancy is.
Yes.
Where that you are supposed to be able to bend over a dead body, put your ear to their lips, and ask it a question. There's a certain ritual you go through. I'm not going to get into that. I don't want any amateurs trying to do that. But you can put your ear, and they're supposed to whisper back to you. It's kind of like the grave whispering. Answer your question, whatever question it is you ask them. And you actually see this in a movie. What was the name of that movie?
I've
Jonah
seen it in
Hex, I
horror
think. You
movies.
remember
Yeah.
Jonah Hex? He does that in
Yes.
the movie. He digs his old partner up, and that's grave whispering too. That's part of necromancy, communication with the dead.
No, I had no idea.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna have
Freaky
to. I'm
stuff.
gonna have to,
Freaky
I'm gonna
stuff.
have to start asking some of these new generation people about
Mm-hmm.
grave whispering. I mean, can you imagine now, ladies and gentlemen? I used to
And
patrol
there is one more thing
graveyards.
about that, Chris. You never ever want to dance on someone's grave. You can get supposedly cursed instantly by the people that are lying there, because that was a very awful disgrace to dance on someone's grave, and you might get an attachment that way. Supposedly, some people claim to have gotten uh, very much like Dybbuk's, attachment from dancing on grave. Do not do that. If you're going to dance, don't dance in a graveyard. It's kind of a good idea.
Wow. I mean, have you not ever patrolled a graveyard or a cemetery when you was on the force? I had to.
Well, I've had some freaky things happen in some cemeteries. Matter of fact, when I first got into spirit research, I went to a cemetery that's here in our town that had a very interesting reputation of being haunted. And sure enough, that night I actually saw ghost lights out in that cemetery, corpse lights, whatever they name you want to call them. And I actually chased those things all night, trying to get close to them. And you would try to advance to it, and the closer you get to it, it go further away from you. And if you backed up, then it would get close. It was like playing a game with you, you know. Those were corpse lights. That's still to me. I call them earth lights. I think there's a natural explanation for it, and maybe not a spiritual thing, but who knows? There could actually be some spiritual type manifestation like that as well.
Yeah.
So you got some
No.
freaky things. Freaky things go on in graveyards.
Well, the stuff that we always caught in graveyard was people doing certain things, and then the
Oh yeah.
illegal activity, right? So, but
That is one actual danger you run into with certain cemeteries. People having done certain rituals that may have opened doors and let certain forces out there, that you'd have to be very, very careful. That is the very first thing I check for, Chris. When I go into an old cemetery, and I've been in a lot of old cemeteries, the first thing I check for is to make sure there's not some kind of ritualistic stuff going on there. You look for telltale signs on the ground, around the graves and stuff, candles, all that kind of stuff. You make sure nothing like that, as much as possible, has gone on there. Then you kind of feel like you've got a little leg up in the saddle on that. That you know what may have happened around there, because you have a lot of shadow person activity in these graveyards. You have a lot of demonic activity, big time the demonic loves graveyards, cemeteries, morgues, and places like that. Uh, they're big on that. So whatever kind of spirit you're dealing with, whether it be evil, human, animal, what elemental, whatever it is, they seem to be drawn to graveyards for some unusual reason. The places of the dead.
I just can't imagine being on patrol, regular routine patrol, and driving through a graveyard on a Friday or Saturday night, think you're going to catch a bunch of kids doing whatever, drinking, and pulling up and blacking out and sneaking through there and hitting your spotlight and seeing 5 or 6 people laying down on top of graves and all rising up at the same. No, not grave whispering. No, I'm good.
Well, the
No.
part about it lying down on the grave is like you're sort of putting yourself on their level, and you're opening that kind of door of communication there, which really not good. I don't advise people to do this because who knows what you're liable to really do on. But you kind of get on their level, and that's why you lay down on it, and you put that ear to the grave, and you put your recorder there. Supposedly, you can get whisperings. But here's something else I better tell you, folks. It's probably not the person that's lying there in that grave that's doing the whispering. It's probably demonic. They love
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah,
The demonic
I would
masquerades a
probably,
lot as they masquerade a lot as human spirits to fool you into that.
well, yeah, that I know they do, but I would probably leave a tape recorder on the grave, but I wouldn't lay on the grave, lay down on top of it. No.
Well, some people have put the recorder just on the grave and see what they would get. And I've heard some interesting stuff that way. But the way to do it is supposed to lay down on the grave. You get on their level, get down as close to them as possible for your communication.
I'm good. No, that's no.
It's freaky. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I learned something new tonight. So yeah, that actually just blew my mind. So
But you know, the holy grail of spiritual research, Chris, is the full bodied apparition, which I've seen several of them. It's always interesting when you see that. Sometimes it can be either a residual or it can be an actual human spirit. Uh, that is the holy grail. That's what you look for, that full bodied apparition. That is something to see because it is very, very interesting. And the one I saw once of an elderly lady was so real, I didn't know it was a ghost. That's the weirdest part of it all. I thought it was somebody because you couldn't see through it. It looked solid. It moved just like a regular person or an elderly person would across the hall, and I saw it, but it was not a living person. It was a ghost. That's all. What else could I tell you? It was a ghost and I don't think it was a demon masquerading as this lady because she was a nice old lady in life. I don't think she would have had any kind of a demonic connection. Uh, I believe it was an actual human spirit, but they are more rare than people really realize. You know, Hollywood tells you run into one every time you turn a corner. That's not true. Uh, Human spirit manifestation is very rare to many occasions, more rare than people think.
so
But
what
when
do
I
you
saw that full out bodied apparition, I thought it was a person. I really did. Until later, I found out it wasn't.
wow. So what do you think about the Black Mirror? Have you ever heard of that?
Oh yeah, I've run into on occasion several times people that have. It's called scrying, by the way, that have messed
Right.
around with black mirrors. You can also do this, by the way, if you want to get modern wise, with a blank TV screen. It's very much similar to a black mirror if you think about it. And I'm talking about when it's turned off and it's black, there's no power on it. You can also do this with water, black water in a pan, supposedly as well. So it's not just a mirror. Let me tell you something freaky about mirrors, though. You know the number one thing. I'm just gonna blow your mind. I don't know if you know this or not. The number one thing demons hate is not a crucifix. It's not holy water.
The
It's a
reflection.
mirror. It's a mirror. They can't stand their own reflection. They
Yeah.
can use mirrors. They can appear in mirrors and use mirrors, but they will not ever want to see themselves in a mirror, or even in water for that matter, because they look so terribly horrible. They would not. You would not want to know that you look like that. And I think that's the number one thing. And I have actually been in a lot of the old houses where they had mirrors in every window facing out to keep demons out of the house.
That's creepy. Is that why a lot of the old houses had all the mirrors in the homes?
Oh yeah, mirrors were something. And once upon a time, Chris, a mirror was a very expensive item. And a lot of the mirrors many years ago had real silver backings to
Silver.
them. So they were
Yes.
very valuable. So that's one of the many reasons why you have superstitions about handling them. Don't break a mirror and all this stuff. They were very valuable. You didn't want the little kids playing with them, definitely. But here's the interesting thing about the mirror, it has almost a connection, a strange connection to the soul in some aspects. When you look in the mirror and you're seeing yourself, you confront yourself. And let me tell you another freaky thing. According to superstition, if you notice, let's say, if you wanted to check up on your girlfriend and find out if she really was a real person and not some other kind of an entity, you would catch her sleeping at midnight and look at her reflection in the mirror. And if it's human, you're okay. But if it's something else, you might want to consider getting another girlfriend. Uh, that's supposed to be able, while you asleep, your true image supposedly shows in the mirror.
Well, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Did not know
So
that.
they have a lot of superstitions and a lot of spiritual connection to mirrors. You should never ever sleep with mirrors crossing each other, because if you have two mirrors crossing you, you're like looking into infinity, and it's sort of like opening a portal. They say, and it's a danger of that. That's the only way demons truly use mirrors. They can use them in certain ceremonies, but like I said, there again, they will not, like the vampire who can't see himself in the mirror. They would not want to see themselves in the mirror. They hate mirrors. They absolutely hate mirrors. They do not like them at all. And certain connections with ghosts and mirrors. I have had many stories. I've never actually seen one of people seeing ghosts in the mirrors. They turn around, there's nothing there, but they can see it in the mirror. That's an interesting aspect. The mirror can see things we can't.
Yeah, we see that a lot in horror movies where somebody's
Mm-hmm.
looking in the mirror and they're like, and they turn around and nothing's there.
Yep.
So,
The mirror. Here's the thing about the mirror. Okay, you ever heard that expression? Mirrors don't lie.
right.
They don't. They don't tell a lie. They tell the truth, and that's why demons, spirits, and all that supposedly have a thing about mirrors. They tell the truth. They don't like that. I don't like my mirror either. It tells the truth too.
That's funny.
There's an old man
So,
looking back at me out of my mirror. I don't know why he got in there, but that's what he goes.
yeah, right. So, what do you tell these new investigators that are coming out onto the market now and out there trying to ghost hunt and dabble into the afterlife? What's your recommendations for them?
Well, really, people should not dabble around in that kind of stuff. Really, you need to be careful with that, because even the Bible strictly forbids communication with spirits. Why? Because it's not. Here's the thing about it. It's not what the communication is about. It's not what you might hear and what you might find out. And most of the time, you're going to be told a bunch of lies anyway. It's not that part of it. It's that danger of attachment. Okay, we've got to look at that. That danger of attachment. If you deal with spirits, you're opening yourself up to having an attachment. And believe me, folks, you don't ever want to get an attachment, because they can make your life a living hell. Okay. whatever it may be, like the Dybbuk. Don't open the Dybbuk box. Uh, don't fool with these things because you run that risk of an attachment, that communication. Be very careful. I never went out of my way many times to communicate with a spirit. I punch them sort of to see if they were there and what they were and what I was dealing with. I didn't want to find out what Uncle Joe had to say about the lottery next week. I don't. That's not what's on. And if you ask questions about the other side, they're not going to tell you anything anyway. Most of the time, especially if it's a demonic spirit, they're only going to tell you a bunch of lies. No, what you're doing with investigation and research into these things is you're punching them to kind of figure out what it is you're dealing with. And that's why I say, and why I talk about that in my book, Beyond the Shadows, you have to approach it in a scientific sort of way to ascertain the information you want. Don't try to get all your information out of the spirit because, like I say, most of the time you're not. You know, so you've got to understand what you're dealing with. You kind of punch it, you kind of push it a little bit and see what it is and what kind of reaction you get. That's where you get a lot of your information on. What is every action has a reaction, even if
Right.
you're dealing with a spiritual thing, everyone has, and you gotta gauge what that reaction means and all that. That's what. So you don't openly try. Do not form a communicative connection, if possible, between these things, because you could possibly open yourself up to attachment.
Yes, that is possible. I think that is feasible. Yes, I do agree with that. Absolutely. So,
And I've had a lot of cases of investigators, Chris. They come back and say, "Oh, now I got an attachment. There's something in my house now, or there's something bothering my kids and all that." And some people foolishly take children on investigations with them. That's a big no-no to my book. I never would do that because children are very susceptible to these things and to attachments. You want to be very careful going in and coming out of these situations. Guard yourself going in and coming out because you do not know what it is you're really dealing with most of the time, and you got to take that into question. You got to be very careful with it. So I've had many cases of investigators that come by to me. Oh, I got an attachment now. There's something in my house. There's something screwing around with my life and my kids and my wife and whatever the case may be. You don't want it to happen. You don't want to ever get to that stage. You want to keep that from prevent that. As the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's very true. Prevent it as much as possible from ever happening. And those attachments can, just like the objects we were talking about earlier and all that, and I could tell you some stories about that. But the interesting thing is, even objects can get attachments. Okay? And you got to be very, very careful what you're dealing with here, folks, because this is the unseen. You can't see it until it's too late or until it attaches to you and does something to you that you don't want it to do. You don't want to put yourself in a dangerous situation. You want to investigate and you want to and research. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. That's how we learn things. But you do it the correct way. Don't do it the wrong way.
yeah, and I think a lot of people they see what they watch off TV and they reenact that. So, and I think they do that in the wrong way, and I think that causes them problems.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yes, I really do. But
And
that
you've got to be very careful, Chris, with the spiritual things because they can very badly affect you. They can attack you in ways you never would dream possible. Okay, they have ways to do that. They have ways to get into your life and into your body in certain ways. You do not want this to happen. You want to prevent it. That's the main thing. But yeah, if you want to investigate and you want to learn, there's nothing wrong with that, definitely. But like I say, do it the right way. Don't go in screwing around or doing stuff like Ouija boards, tapping on tables and tarot cards and all that stuff. Be very careful what you're dealing with. You might do it the wrong way and you might pay for it. Uh, just like with, and I've told this many times about objects, be careful what you bring into your house. You don't know the history of it. Let me tell you a quick story, okay? Right quick, and we got to wind it up here. Let me tell you a quick story. I had a lady call me one time, and she said, I got some freaky stuff going on in my house. My doors opening, cold spots, faucets being turned on, lights being turned off and on, the usual stuff. And she said, and I've been living in this house 30 years. Nothing has ever happened before. Well, that was a bing, the bell went off. Aha. What have you brought into your house recently? I asked her. She said, oh, nothing really. I said, you hadn't brought anything in, no statues or anything? She said, no. Well, I bought a love seat at a yard sale a couple of weeks ago before all this started happening. She said, could that be it? I said, well, here's what you do, ma'am. I said, go back to where you bought that love seat and find out the history on it, okay? And come back and call me, okay? Well, she called me a couple of days later. She said, how did you know about that love seat? I said, I didn't know anything about it. What you talking about? She said, well, a man committed suicide on that love seat. I said, ah, there you go. Get rid of that love seat.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that on previous shows about furniture and that old man and his recliner. Get out of my chair. It's my chair. His favorite chair. We've seen that in movies, but I mean, you got to be careful. You just don't know what you're buying, especially in antique stores and so forth. So yeah.
Oh yeah, and Chris, some people are that way too. Be careful who you associate with. They may have an attachment, and I have known this to happen. This is freaky, I know, but sometimes people with an attachment can leave that attachment with you if they're not careful.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Well, Dennis, once again, an awesome show. I'm glad that you got to come on and attend. A fascinating subject. My REM pod only went off one time, so that's a good sign. My light didn't go off during this show like it did last show, so that's interesting. But
it's gonna be on tonight at 9:00. Hunting the Shadows. I'm gonna have a surprise for everyone out there tonight, and also we're gonna talk about living dinosaurs. So it's 9:00 on the Midnight Road YouTube channel.
All right, there you go. Well, take care, Dennis. We'll see you shortly, and God bless, and everybody. We'll see you at 9:00, and when we talk about cryptids and the news. So take care, everybody. Good night. Bye-bye.